I am Maynard, 32 years old, and until last week I thought the house in Portland, Oregon, where I grew up, would always be my home. Then came my father's cold ultimatum over dinner. You have 1 week to get your stuff out. Your brother owns that house now. The shock froze me in place, but something else quickly took over: determination. What my father and brother didn't know was that I already had a plan forming in my mind. When they arrived a week later, they were not prepared for what they found inside. If you are watching this from somewhere, you call home, drop a comment, letting me know how long you have lived there. And subscribe to hear how I turned this betrayal into something no one in my family expected. The two-story colonial on Maple Street had been my anchor for as long as I could remember. My earliest memories were formed within those walls, learning to ride my bike in the driveway, doing homework at the kitchen table, and celebrating every milestone surrounded by family photos that lined the hallway. That house was more than a structure. It was the physical embodiment of my life story. 5 years ago, my mother lost her battle with breast cancer. The day we lost her, something in my father changed. The kind, supportive man who had raised me retreated into a shell of grief that he tried to fill with bourbon and isolation. While he physically remained in the house emotionally, he checked out, leaving me to pick up the pieces of our shattered family. I stepped up without hesitation. At 27, I put my own grief aside to become not just a daughter, but a caretaker. I managed the household finances, ensured bills were paid on time, coordinated home repairs, and most importantly, tried to provide emotional support for my father during his darkest days. I would sit with him on Sunday afternoons, gently encouraging him to eat the meals I prepared, listening to him reminisce about Mom when he was sober enough to remember. Meanwhile, my younger brother Jason had built a life 2,000 miles away in Florida. He had moved there for college 10 years earlier and never looked back. His calls became less frequent after Mom's funeral, and his visits home non-existent. During the entire first year after Mom's death, he visited exactly once, staying at a hotel rather than in his old bedroom, citing allergies to explain his absence from the house. For the past 5 years, I had been the one attending every doctor's appointment with Dad, managing his medications, and making sure he didn't drink himself into oblivion on the anniversary of Mom's death. I was the one who held his hand during his knee surgery 3 years ago, and slept in an uncomfortable hospital chair to ensure he wasn't alone. What I didn't know was that Jason had apparently begun calling Dad regularly 6 months ago. Their conversations happened when I was at work, and neither mentioned these calls to me. I later discovered that Jason had even visited twice, carefully timing his appearances when I was away on business trips. These secret visits bothered me more than I could express, not because they happened, but because they were deliberately hidden from me. My contributions to the house went beyond emotional support. Over the years, I had paid off $30,000 of the remaining mortgage, using my savings. As an accountant at Westridge Financial, I made a comfortable living, but dedicating such a significant portion of my income to the house was a sacrifice I made willingly. I believed I was investing in my future home. The renovations I spearheaded were extensive. I personally funded and oversaw the installation of a new kitchen with custom cabinetry, granite countertops, and stainless steel appliances. The master bathroom renovation had been a labor of love, completed just last year, with a walk-in shower, heated floors, and dual vanities. The backyard patio and landscaping were my design, created to give Dad a peaceful place to sit in the evenings. There had been conversations about the future of the house, of course. After Mom passed, Dad had assured me through his tears that the house would be mine someday. "Your mother would want you to have it," he had said. "You've always been the one who loved this place the most." Though we never formalized this agreement with legal documents, I had trusted my father's word. That trust now seemed tragically misplaced. The family dynamics that led to this moment were complicated, but clear in retrospect. Despite my constant presence and support, Dad had always held a special place for Jason. Growing up, Jason was the athlete, the charmer, the son who resembled my father in both appearance and temperament. I was more like my mother, practical, reliable, and often overlooked. Dad's favoritism was subtle, but persistent, manifesting in the way his face lit up when Jason called, while my daily acts of care were received with quiet acceptance rather than enthusiasm. Before she died, my mother had pulled me aside during one of her more lucid days in hospice. "The house should be yours when the time comes," she had whispered, squeezing my hand with what little strength she had left. "I've told your father as much. You're the heart of this family, Maynard. You'll keep our memories alive." I had held onto those words like a promise, never imagining they would be so easily broken. Looking back, I should have insisted on legal documentation. I should have asked for my name to be added to the deed when I started making mortgage payments. I should have protected myself from the betrayal that was coming. But I had trusted family. And that was my first mistake. The night everything changed began ordinarily enough. I had prepared Dad's favorite meal, pot roast with roasted potatoes and carrots, just the way Mom used to make it. The table was set with the good china, which should have been my first clue that something was amiss. Dad had called that morning asking me to come for dinner, mentioning he had something important to discuss. I assumed it might be related to his health or perhaps a decision about downsizing to a smaller place. When I arrived, I was surprised to find Jason's car in the driveway. He hadn't mentioned coming to town. Inside, they were both already seated at the dining room table, an unnatural formality hanging in the air. Dad had even put on a button-down shirt instead of his usual flannel. Jason wore an expression I couldn't quite read, something between smugness and discomfort. "Glad you could make it, Dad," said his voice oddly detached. No hug. No warm greeting. Just a clinical acknowledgement of my presence. I took my usual seat across from Jason, noting the tension in Dad's shoulders as he served the food I had taught him to prepare months ago. We ate in uncomfortable silence for several minutes before Dad finally cleared his throat. "I've made some decisions about the house," he announced, setting down his fork with deliberate precision. The way he avoided eye contact told me whatever was coming would not be good news. "I've signed the house over to Jason." He continued, his tone matter of fact, as if he were commenting on the weather rather than upending my entire life. The paperwork was finalized yesterday. The fork I was holding clattered against my plate. "What do you mean?" I asked, certain I had misheard. "It means the house legally belongs to Jason now," Dad clarified, still not meeting my eyes. "I've transferred the deed to his name." I looked at Jason, who had the decency to appear slightly uncomfortable, though not enough to refuse this unearned windfall. "Dad and I have been talking about this for months," he said, his voice carrying a rehearsed quality. "We both think it's for the best." The best for whom I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper as the reality began to sink in. The home I had poured my heart, soul, and finances into for years was being handed to someone who had been absent through our family's hardest times. Dad finally looked at me, his expression hardening. "A son should carry on the family legacy," he stated, as if this antiquated notion justified everything. "This house has been in our family for generations. It should stay in the family name." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. I had kept my maiden name after my brief marriage and subsequent divorce specifically because I wanted to maintain my connection to our family heritage. Jason, meanwhile, had joked multiple times about changing his last name to his wife Melanie's because it sounded better for business. "I've been here," I said, my voice gaining strength through my rising anger. "I've been here every day for 5 years, while Jason built his life in Florida. I've paid $30,000 toward the mortgage. I've renovated the kitchen, the bathrooms, the backyard. I've driven you to every doctor's appointment, managed your medications, and been here on the anniversaries when you couldn't get out of bed." Dad waved his hand dismissively. "And we appreciate that," he said. The collective "we," landing like a slap. "But this decision isn't about the past. It's about the future of our family name." Jason leaned forward, offering what he clearly thought was a generous compromise. Look, you can stay as a tenant for a while if you need time to find a new place. We're not monsters. His condescending tone made it clear that this was not a genuine offer, but rather an attempt to assuage his minimal guilt. How long have you been planning this? I asked, looking between them. Does it matter? Dad replied. What's done is done. The papers are signed. In that moment, a slideshow of memories flashed through my mind, holding Dad's hand through Mom's funeral, when Jason claimed he was too emotional to serve as a pallbearer, sleeping on the hospital room couch during Dad's knee surgery recovery, while Jason sent a generic get-well-soon card, spending countless weekends repainting rooms and fixing plumbing issues while Jason posted beach photos from his Florida life. I've been more than a daughter to you, I said quietly. I've been your caretaker, your support system, your financial safety net. And this is how you repay that loyalty. Dad's expression remained unmoved. You have 1 week to get your things out, he stated flatly. Jason will be moving back next month, and he needs time to prepare the house for his family. 1 week. That's not even legally sufficient notice for a tenant, let alone family, I protested. You're not a tenant, Dad countered. You've been living here out of my goodwill, and now that goodwill has expired. I turned to Jason, searching for any sign of the brother I once knew. You're okay with this? With throwing me out of the home I've maintained for years? Jason had the audacity to shrug. Dad made his decision. I'm just respecting his wishes as his son. The emphasis on son was deliberate. Another twist of the knife. I stood up, unable to remain at that table a minute longer. This isn't over, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. I refused to let break into tears. It is over, Dad responded, his tone final. 1 week, Maynard. Not a day more. The drive home, to what I now knew was no longer my home, was a blur of tears and rage. I pulled over twice, unable to see through my crying. The betrayal cut so deep it was physical, a hollow ache spreading from my chest to every extremity. For 5 years I had put my own life on hold to be there for my father, and in return he had cast me aside in favor of the son who had abandoned him during his darkest hours. That first night alone in what was now Jason's house was the longest of my life. I walked from room to room, touching the walls I had painted, the cabinets. I had installed the furniture I had carefully selected. Each object held memories that now felt tainted. The family photos that once brought comfort now seemed to mock me with their false promise of belonging. I curled up in my childhood bed and cried until there were no tears left, just a cold, hard resolve beginning to form in the center of my grief. When I woke the next morning, something had shifted inside me. The paralyzing shock had given way to a clarity I hadn't expected. I sat up in bed, wiping away the residue of dried tears, and reached for a notebook. If I had 1 week, I would use it strategically. My first call was to my friend Alicia, a real estate attorney, who had helped me navigate my divorce 3 years prior. I explained the situation over coffee at her office, laying out the verbal agreements, my financial contributions, and the sudden betrayal. Legally, it's complicated, Alicia admitted after listening carefully. Without your name on the deed, or a written agreement about your contributions, we'd be fighting an uphill battle in court. What about the money I put into the mortgage? The renovations, I asked. We could potentially make a case for unjust enrichment or establish a constructive trust, she explained. But litigation would be expensive, emotionally draining, and could take years with no guarantee of success. As Alicia outlined potential legal avenues, I realized that a protracted court battle wasn't what I wanted. The relationship with my father was already damaged beyond easy repair. Dragging him through court would sever it completely. Besides, even if I won some financial compensation, the house itself would likely remain with Jason. What about the improvements I've made? The appliances I purchased? The fixtures I installed, I asked. Alicia's expression shifted. That's a different matter. If you have receipts showing you personally paid for items that aren't permanently affixed to the house, those remain your property. You have every right to take them with you. This conversation sparked the first element of my plan. That afternoon, I returned to the house and began a methodical inventory of everything I had purchased or improved over the past 5 years. I dug through filing cabinets, searched email receipts, and compiled bank statements showing transfers for house expenses. The list was extensive: refrigerator, dishwasher, washer, and dryer, all purchased new 2 years ago. Custom bookshelves in the living room that were designed to look built-in but were actually freestanding. The 60-inch smart television and sound system. Even the new water heater installed last winter when the old one failed during a cold snap. I created spreadsheets documenting every contribution: $30,000 toward the mortgage, $22,000 for the kitchen renovation, $15,000 for the master bathroom remodel, $8,000 for the patio and landscaping, countless smaller expenses for repairs and maintenance that added up to thousands more. All told, I had invested over $80,000 into a house that was now being handed to my brother. My next call was to Danielle, my closest friend since college. When I explained what had happened, she immediately offered her guest room for as long as I needed. "You're not alone in this," she assured me. "We'll figure it out together." With temporary housing secured, I shifted focus to finding a permanent place. I spent hours online researching apartments in the area, eventually scheduling viewings for 3 promising options. By the end of day 2, I had signed a lease on a modern 1-bedroom apartment downtown using part of my emergency savings for the security deposit and first month's rent. The emotional toll of these practical steps was immense. Each item, cataloged, each arrangement made, was an acknowledgement that my family home would no longer be mine. I allowed myself periodic breaks to cry, to rage, to grieve, but always returned to my plan with renewed determination. On day 3, I contacted a storage facility and rented a large unit. I then called a moving company and scheduled them for day 6, the day before my father's deadline. I was careful to request movers who had experience with disassembling furniture and handling delicate items. That evening, I reached out to several neighbors who had witnessed my dedication to the house over the years. Mrs. Peterson next door had brought me cookies when I spent a weekend repainting the exterior. Mr. Rodriguez across the street had helped me install the garden lighting. They deserved to hear what was happening from me rather than witnessing a sudden move with no explanation. Their reactions ranged from shock to outrage on my behalf. "After everything you've done for that house and your father," Mrs. Peterson exclaimed. "It's not right. Not right at all." These conversations yielded unexpected support. Several neighbors offered to help with the move, to store items temporarily if needed, and most importantly, to serve as witnesses to my years of investment in the property if it ever came to legal action. Day 4 brought a difficult decision point. While I had every right to take the items I had purchased, I struggled with where to draw the line. The kitchen cabinets I had installed were technically mine. I had paid for them entirely, but removing them would leave the kitchen unusable. The same was true for the bathroom fixtures. Was I prepared to be that drastic in my response? After careful consideration and another consultation with Alicia, I decided on a measured approach. I would remove the items that were clearly mine, without causing structural damage to the house. The appliances would come with me, as would furniture, electronics, and decor items. The cabinets and fixtures would stay, though I documented them thoroughly for potential future claims. I spent day 5 preparing each room, carefully labeling what would be moved and what would stay. I took extensive photos of the house in its current state, both as evidence of my improvements and to ensure I could prove the condition in which I left it. Throughout this process, I received not a single call from my father or brother. Their silence spoke volumes about their expectations. They assumed I would quietly pack some clothes and personal items, leaving the house intact for Jason to enjoy. They had no idea what was coming. As the week progressed, my plan evolved from one born of hurt and anger to a calculated statement about value and consequences. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice, about making visible the invisible labor and investment I had contributed all these years, about ensuring that if Jason wanted the house, he would have to invest in it as I had done. By the night before the movers were to arrive, I felt a strange calm. I had done everything legally and ethically. I had documented every step. I had secured my future housing and storage needs. I was prepared for the confrontation that would inevitably come. And for the first time since that fateful dinner, I slept without tears. The movers arrived at 8 in the morning, pulling their large truck into the driveway with practiced efficiency. I had coffee waiting and detailed instructions printed out for each room. The team of 4 men looked slightly surprised at the scope of the job. This clearly wasn't the typical bedroom and personal items move they might have expected. "We're taking all the major appliances," I explained to Rico, the team leader, showing him the kitchen first. "The refrigerator, dishwasher, stove, and microwave all need to be disconnected and loaded." Rico nodded professionally, though I caught the quick look he exchanged with his colleagues. This wasn't a standard move, but they were prepared to handle it. In the living room, I pointed out the entertainment system, the custom bookshelves, and the furniture I had purchased. "The sofa, coffee table, and area rug are coming with me. The wall-mounted television needs to be carefully removed and packed." Room by room, we went through the house, identifying what would be taken. In the master bathroom, they would remove the shower heads, the medicine cabinet, and the vanity lights I had installed. In the guest room, all the furniture would go, leaving only the built-in closet shelving I had added last year. As the movers began their work, I focused on packing smaller items and personal belongings. I wrapped family photos in bubble wrap, boxed up books and kitchenware, and carefully packed the quilt my mother had made before she died. These treasures would come with me to my new apartment, carrying the true essence of home that transcended the physical structure. The process of dismantling what I had so lovingly built was more emotional than I had anticipated. Watching the refrigerator where I had posted grocery lists and family photos being wheeled out the front door brought a lump to my throat. Seeing the empty space where my grandmother's reading chair had sat for years made the reality of my departure sink in deeper. Danielle arrived around noon, bringing sandwiches for me and the moving crew. Her presence was a steadying force as the house became increasingly empty. "You're doing the right thing," she reassured me, helping to pack kitchen items into labeled boxes. "They left you no choice." By mid-afternoon, neighbors began to notice the unusual activity. Mrs. Peterson came over with a concerned expression, watching as the movers carefully maneuvered my dining table through the front door. "I knew you were moving, dear, but I didn't realize you were taking everything," she said, her eyes wide as she peeked into the increasingly bare house. "I'm taking what belongs to me," I explained calmly. "What I paid for with my own money." Her expression shifted from surprise to understanding. "Good for you," she said finally. "They should see exactly what they're losing." Mr. Rodriguez appeared as the entertainment system was being loaded, offering to help with some of the heavier items. His assistance was welcome, as was his vocal support. "That father of yours doesn't know what he's done," he muttered, as we carried out boxes of books. "You've been the heart of this house for years." By evening, the transformation was striking. The living room contained only the built-in window seat and the wall-mounted shelves that came with the house. The kitchen stood empty of all appliances, with only the cabinets and countertops remaining. The bedrooms were stripped of furniture, leaving only the mounted curtain rods and blinds. I had been meticulous about legality. Nothing permanently attached to the house had been removed, unless I had clear documentation of having purchased and installed it myself. The house itself remained structurally intact and undamaged. I had even hired a professional cleaner to come through after the movers finished, ensuring that the empty spaces were spotless. Around 7 that evening, as the moving truck was being secured for transport to the storage facility, I received the first call from my father. "What's going on over there?" he demanded without preamble. "Mrs. Peterson just called to ask if we were selling the house because she saw a moving truck." "I'm following your instructions," I replied evenly. "I'm removing my belongings before the deadline." "Your belongings," he repeated slowly. "What exactly are you taking, Maynard?" "Everything that belongs to me," I stated. "Everything I purchased with my own money. The appliances, the furniture, the electronics, all the things I invested in over the years while maintaining this house." There was a long silence before he spoke again. "You can't just strip the house bare," he protested, his voice rising. "That's not what I meant. You should have been more specific then." I responded, my tone remaining calm despite my racing heart. "You gave me a week to get my stuff out." "That's exactly what I'm doing." "This is ridiculous. I'm coming over right now," he threatened. "I'll be gone by 9, I informed him. "The house will be clean and undamaged. The keys will be on the kitchen counter." He hung up without another word. I knew I had perhaps an hour before he arrived, and the movers were nearly finished loading the truck. I did one final walkthrough, making sure nothing had been overlooked. In each room, I took after photos to document the condition in which I was leaving the property. The house echoed with emptiness. Now my footsteps resonating on the hardwood floors I had refinished 3 years ago. Without furniture and decor to absorb sound, the space felt cavernous and cold. It was no longer the warm home I had maintained, but a hollow shell waiting for new life. As predicted, my father's car pulled into the driveway just as the movers were preparing to leave. Jason was with him, both men jumping out of the car with expressions of disbelief as they took in the moving truck filled with what they had assumed would remain in the house. I thanked the moving crew, tipped them generously, and watched as they pulled away, leaving me to face the confrontation that had been brewing all week. With a deep breath, I turned toward my father and brother, ready for the next phase of my plan. My father stormed up the walkway, his face flushed with anger. Jason followed close behind, his expression shifting from smug certainty to growing concern as he glanced at the departing moving truck. "What have you done?" my father demanded as he reached the front porch where I stood with keys in hand. "Exactly what you asked," I replied calmly. "I've removed my belongings from the house." "Your belongings," he sputtered. "You can't possibly claim all that was yours." I pulled out my phone and opened the document I had prepared. "I have receipts for everything I've taken," I explained. "The refrigerator purchased 2 years ago when the old one died. The stove and dishwasher both upgraded during the kitchen renovation I paid for. The washer and dryer I bought last Christmas. The living room furniture I selected and purchased when the old set wore out." Jason pushed past us and threw open the front door, stopping short at the threshold. From where I stood, I could see his reaction to the empty living room devoid of furniture, electronics, and even curtains. His shock was evident in the way his shoulders stiffened. "This is vandalism," my father declared, following Jason inside. "No, it's property rights," I corrected, stepping in after them. "I've taken only what legally belongs to me. I've removed nothing that would damage the structure of the house." The three of us stood in the empty living room, the space between us filled with tension and the echo of our voices against bare walls. Jason moved toward the kitchen, his footsteps heavy with disbelief. "Where are the appliances?" he called out, his voice rising. "How is anyone supposed to live here without a refrigerator? Without a stove?" "The same way I did when they broke down," I answered, following him. "By purchasing new ones." My father circled the room, running his hand along the countertop, as if searching for something that might have been overlooked. "This isn't what we agreed to," he said, his voice lower now but still tense. "We didn't agree to anything," I reminded him. "You made a unilateral decision to give my home to Jason, and told me to get my stuff out. I've complied with your demand." Jason leaned against the empty space where the refrigerator had stood, his expression darkening. "You did this to spite us," he accused. "I did this because I invested over $80,000 in this house over the past 5 years," I stated firmly. "Money for the mortgage, for renovations, for maintenance and repairs. Money I spent believing this would be my home based on promises made to me." I handed my father a folder containing copies of all my documentation, receipts, bank statements, before and after photos of renovations. "Everything is itemized here. You're welcome to review it and contest any item you believe wasn't mine to take." He took the folder, reluctantly flipping through the first few pages with a deepening frown. Jason looked over his shoulder, his confidence visibly faltering as he processed the extent of my contributions. "You expect me to just move into an empty house?" Jason asked, gesturing around the kitchen. "Where am I supposed to store food without a refrigerator?" "That's not my problem," I replied honestly. "Just as my housing situation wasn't your concern when you accepted this property knowing I considered it my home." A knock at the open front door interrupted our confrontation. Mr. Rodriguez stood there, his expression stern, as he surveyed the scene. "Everything all right in here, Maynard?" "I saw your father arrive and thought I'd check in." The presence of a witness changed the dynamic immediately. My father straightened, attempting to regain his composure. "This is a family matter, Salvador," he said stiffly. "A family matter that affects the neighborhood," Mr. Rodriguez replied, stepping inside uninvited. "Maynard has been a valued member of this community for years. She's the one who organized the block party last summer and helped Mrs. Peterson after her surgery. She's the one who's maintained this property and kept it from becoming an eyesore." Jason shifted uncomfortably, clearly not having considered the social aspects of his inheritance. "We're just having a discussion about property," he said weakly. "Property that Maynard has invested in significantly," Mr. Rodriguez continued. "My wife and I have witnessed her working on this house for years, while you were nowhere to be seen." Mrs. Peterson appeared behind him, adding her presence to the impromptu neighborhood delegation. "We've all seen it," she confirmed. "The landscaping, the exterior, paint the patio where we had the neighborhood watch meetings. Maynard did all of that." My father looked increasingly uncomfortable as the neighbors essentially testified to my contributions. This public dimension was clearly not something he had anticipated. "This is still legally my decision," he insisted, though with noticeably less conviction. "The house is in Jason's name now, and everything I purchased is mine to take," I reiterated. "That's legally my right." Jason walked through to the living room, then up the stairs, returning moments later with a more subdued expression. "The bedrooms are empty too," he reported, as if this might somehow surprise us. "I slept on a mattress I purchased," I confirmed. "I used dressers and nightstands I bought. Those came with me." My father's face had transitioned from anger to something more complex, a mixture of frustration and dawning realization. "You're really going to leave it like this?" he asked, gesturing to the bare rooms. "You're really going to stand by your decision?" I countered. For a moment our eyes locked, and I saw something shift in his expression. The first hint that he might be reconsidering the wisdom of his actions. But pride kept him from backing down. "I could sue you for this," he threatened half-heartedly. "For taking property that legally belongs to me," I replied. "You're welcome to try. My attorney has reviewed everything and confirmed I'm within my rights." The mention of legal counsel seemed to deflate him further. He looked around once more, perhaps, seeing for the first time just how much I had contributed to making this house a home. "Here are the keys," I said, placing them on the kitchen counter with a finality that resonated through the empty room. "As requested, I'm out before your deadline. The house is clean, undamaged, and now in Jason's hands." I turned to leave, nodding respectfully to Mr. Rodriguez and Mrs. Peterson as I passed. They stepped aside, creating a path for my exit, while remaining as witnesses to this final moment. "Maynard," my father called after me as I reached the door. I paused but didn't turn around. "Where will you go?" The question came too late to seem like genuine concern. "Somewhere I'm valued," I answered simply, and walked out the front door of my childhood home for what might be the last time. As I got into my car, I glanced back at the house. Through the window, I could see Jason gesturing animatedly, while my father stood still, looking around the empty kitchen, as if seeing it, truly seeing it, for the first time in years. The neighbors remained on the porch, silent sentinels, ensuring that no further demands would be made of me today. I drove away with mixed emotions. Sadness for what had been lost pride in standing up for myself, and a strange sense of liberation. The house behind me represented my past. The road ahead led to whatever future I chose to build for myself. The first week in my new apartment was a strange mixture of grief and freedom. I had taken only what would fit comfortably in the smaller space, leaving the rest in storage until I decided on a more permanent living situation. The one-bedroom downtown had modern amenities and large windows overlooking the city, but it didn't yet feel like home. Each morning I woke momentarily disoriented, reaching for familiar landmarks that were no longer there. 10 days after the move, my phone rang with my father's number. I hesitated before answering, unsure if I was ready for another confrontation. "Maynard," he began, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "The furnace isn't working. Do you know who serviced it last?" The question was so practical, so divorced from the emotional turmoil between us, that I almost laughed. "Harriman Heating and Cooling," I replied automatically. "Their number should be on the service sticker on the side of the unit." I looked. "It's not there," he said, an edge of frustration in his voice. "I have it in my contacts," I offered, then paused. "But my consultation services aren't free anymore." The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. For years I had managed these household details without recognition. That era was over. "What do you mean?" he finally asked. "I mean that my knowledge and assistance have value," I explained calmly. "Just like the appliances and furniture I invested in. If Jason wants information about the house systems I've maintained for 5 years, he can hire me as a consultant. My rate is $75 per hour." Another long pause followed. "You can't be serious," he said eventually. "I've never been more serious," I assured him. "I've spent years building expertise about that house, which service providers are reliable, which systems need regular maintenance, where the quirks and problems lie. That knowledge is valuable especially to new owners." I could almost hear him struggling with this new reality. "This is Petty Maynard," he finally said. "No, Dad. Petty would be refusing to help at all. I'm simply establishing professional boundaries, now that we no longer have a personal relationship that would justify free labor." He hung up without responding. I set my phone down and returned to unpacking, feeling strangely empowered by the exchange. For the first time, I had defined the value of my contributions on my own terms. Over the next few weeks, word of what had happened spread through our extended family and social circle. My Aunt Catherine called horrified by my father's actions. "I had no idea he would do something like this," she said. "Your mother would be heartbroken." Friends from high school reached out on social media, offering support and expressing disbelief. Even my father's longtime fishing buddy Frank stopped by my new apartment with a housewarming plant and an awkward apology. "Your dad's making a mistake," he said simply. I told him as much, but you know how stubborn he can be. Meanwhile, I threw myself into establishing my new life. I focused on making my apartment feel like mine, selecting artwork and decor that expressed my personality rather than maintaining family traditions. I joined a local book club, started taking weekend hiking trips with Danielle, and even began dating again after years of putting my social life on hold to care for my father. At work, I channeled my energy into a project that had been on the back burner, developing a new financial analysis system that caught the attention of senior management. 3 months after the move, I was offered a promotion to senior accountant with a substantial salary increase. Your focus has been extraordinary lately, my boss commented during the offer discussion. Whatever changes you've made in your personal life seem to be benefiting your professional performance. I realized she was right. Freed from the constant demands of maintaining the house and supporting my father, I had more energy for my own goals and ambitions. The betrayal had been painful, but it had also removed a burden I hadn't fully acknowledged. As for Jason and my father, their situation evolved in ways I monitored through neighborhood sources rather than direct contact. Mrs. Peterson kept me updated during our monthly coffee dates, reporting that Jason had moved in 3 weeks after my departure, bringing his wife and their 2 young children. They had to buy all new appliances, she reported with poorly concealed satisfaction. And they've had 3 different repairmen out trying to figure out why the upstairs heating vents aren't working properly. According to Mr. Rodriguez, who still maintained his friendship with my father Jason, was discovering that homeownership came with unexpected challenges. The roof started leaking last month, he told me, during a chance meeting at the grocery store. Your brother was complaining about the cost of repairs, said he didn't realize how expensive maintaining an older home would be. 4 months after the move, I received a text from Jason, the first direct communication since the confrontation. Did you know the property taxes were so high? Dad never mentioned it. I didn't respond. Tax information was public record accessible through the county assessor's office. His failure to research this basic information before accepting the property wasn't my problem to solve. 6 months into my new life, I received another call from my father. This time, his voice carried a different tone. Less demanding, more subdued. Your brother is considering selling the house, he said without preamble. That's his decision, I replied neutrally. The property belongs to him now. He says it's too much work, too expensive to maintain, my father continued. He's looking at listings closer to Melanie's parents in Beaverton. I absorbed this information silently, noting the irony, but choosing not to point it out. I'm sorry to hear that, I said finally, though we both knew I wasn't. He wouldn't get what it's worth, my father admitted. Not with all the updates needed now. The implication hung unspoken between us. Updates that wouldn't have been needed had they not driven away the person who had been maintaining the property all along. Real estate is always a gamble, I observed. Sometimes investments don't pay off the way we expect. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. I've been having some health issues, he said, changing the subject. Blood pressure problems. The doctor wants me on medication. This was his attempt at re-establishing our previous dynamic. Him sharing health concerns me stepping in to manage them. But those days were gone. I hope you're following medical advice, I said simply. Taking care of your health is important. The conversation ended soon after neither of us quite knowing how to navigate this new territory. I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Concern for his health tempered by the memory of betrayal satisfaction at Jason's struggles balanced against sadness for the breakdown of family bonds. That evening, as I sat on my new balcony watching the sunset over the city skyline, I reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. The initial pain had faded, replaced by a growing confidence in my ability to build a life entirely of my own design. The betrayal had forced me to redefine myself outside the role of daughter and caretaker, to discover strengths I might never have recognized otherwise. My phone buzzed with a text from Danielle confirming our plans for a weekend road trip to the coast. My calendar showed upcoming book club meetings, dinner dates, and professional development workshops. My life was full and becoming fuller. Not despite losing my childhood home, but in some ways because of it. The house on Maple Street would always be part of my story, but it no longer defined my future. That belonged to me alone, and for the first time in years, I was excited to see where it might lead. 1 year after leaving my childhood home, I stood in my new condo surveying the space that was now unquestionably mine. After 6 months, In the downtown apartment, I had found this two-bedroom unit in a renovated historic building and purchased it using my promotion bonus and the emergency fund I no longer needed to maintain my father's house. The hardwood floors, exposed brick walls, and large windows created a space that reflected my personality rather than preserved family traditions. The journey to this point had been challenging but transformative. Jason had indeed sold the house on Maple Street, accepting an offer significantly below market value, just to be free of the responsibility. According to Mrs. Peterson, who still kept me updated, the new owners were a young couple who immediately began extensive renovations, essentially gutting the interior to create a more modern space. "Nothing like what you did," she assured me during one of our regular phone calls. "All that gorgeous woodwork you preserved. They tore it out. Such a shame." In a strange way, this news brought closure. The house I had loved and maintained no longer existed, even if the structure remained. The home I had created had departed when I did living on only in photographs and memories. My father's health had continued to decline, a combination of age, stress, and years of inconsistent self-care catching up with him. 6 months ago, following a minor stroke, his doctor had recommended assisted living. Jason, now settled in Beaverton, had claimed work responsibilities prevented him from being involved in the transition. The call I had been both expecting and dreading came on a Tuesday morning. "Maynard." My father said, his voice smaller than I remembered. "I need help." We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between my condo and his house. He looked older than his 68 years. His shoulders hunched, his movements hesitant. The confident man who had delivered his ultimatum 18 months ago was gone, replaced by someone visibly struggling with the consequences of his decisions. "Jason says he can't help with the move," he explained, stirring his coffee without drinking it. "He's too busy with work and the kids." I nodded, unsurprised. "What are you asking of me specifically?" My direct question seemed to catch him off guard. In the past, I would have immediately offered comprehensive assistance, anticipating needs before they were voiced. That pattern was broken now. "I need help sorting through my things," he admitted. "Deciding what to take to Creekside Village. The apartment there is small, and I can't—" He trailed off, gesturing vaguely with hands that showed a slight tremor. "I can help with that," I said after careful consideration. "But we need to establish some boundaries first." He looked up, momentarily confused by this unfamiliar concept between us. "Boundaries? Yes, I'll help you, as a daughter should help her father in need. But I'm not resuming the role of unpaid caretaker. I can devote 3 weekends to helping you sort, pack, and move. Beyond that, you'll need to hire professional services." The clarity of my terms seemed to both surprise and relieve him. "That's fair," he acknowledged. "More than fair, considering." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. The unspoken acknowledgement of his betrayal hung between us, neither fully addressed nor entirely forgotten. We set dates for the 3 weekends, and I provided him with contact information for senior moving services that could handle anything beyond what we accomplished together. As we prepared to leave, he hesitated, then spoke the words that had clearly been difficult for him to formulate. "I made a mistake," he said simply. "With the house. With you. I was wrong." It wasn't a dramatic apology, but from a man of his generation and temperament, it represented a significant admission. I accepted it with a nod, neither rushing to forgive nor rejecting the overture. "We all make mistakes," I replied. "The question is what we learn from them." The process of helping him downsize proved surprisingly healing for both of us. As we sorted through decades of accumulated possessions, we inevitably encountered objects that triggered memories, both painful and precious. Working side by side created space for conversations that might never have happened otherwise. "Your mother wanted you to have the house," he admitted during our second weekend, as we packed books from his study. "She made me promise before she died." I paused, a volume of poetry in my hands. "I know," I said, quietly. She told me. I convinced myself Jason needed it more. He continued his focus on the books, allowing him to speak difficult truths. That he had a family, that the family name should continue there. But that wasn't it, not really. What was it then, I asked, giving him the opening he seemed to need. "After your mother died, the house felt like hers. And you're so much like her. Having you there, taking care of things the way she would have." He shook his head. It was a constant reminder of what I'd lost. I think I wanted to break that connection to stop the house from being hers. It was selfish and wrong. This insight didn't erase the pain of his actions, but it offered context I hadn't previously understood. His betrayal had been driven partly by grief, misguided and harmful, but not solely intended to hurt me. "We both loved her," I said simply. "We just handled that love differently." By our third weekend together, we had established a new kind of relationship. Not the close bond we once shared, but not the bitter estrangement of the past year either. Something cautious, but genuine. With clearer boundaries and more honest communication than we'd ever managed before. On moving day, as the last boxes were loaded into the van that would take them to Creekside Village, my father paused in what had been his bedroom for 40 years. "I should have put everything in writing," he said, looking around the empty space. "The house, the arrangements, your contributions." I was sloppy with the most important things. We both were, I acknowledged. I should have insisted on legal documentation when I started investing in the property. I shouldn't have trusted verbal assurances for something so significant. He nodded, accepting this shared responsibility. "What's the most important lesson you've learned from all this?" he asked, perhaps seeking reassurance that some good had come from his mistakes. I considered the question carefully. "That my worth isn't tied to what I give or do for others," I answered honestly. "That I don't need to earn love through sacrifice. And practically speaking, that everything important should be in writing, especially with family." He smiled faintly at this last point. "Good lessons. Expensive ones. The most valuable ones usually are," I replied. As we drove separately to Creekside Village, him following the moving van, me bringing a few delicate items in my car, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 18 months. The betrayal that had seemed like an ending had instead been a painful but necessary beginning. It had forced me to rebuild not just my living situation, but my understanding of myself and my relationships. I had learned to value my contributions and set appropriate boundaries. I had discovered strength I hadn't known I possessed. I had built a new home that was truly mine, not a repository of family obligation and unbalanced giving. My father was settling into his new reality too, a smaller space, reduced independence, and the consequences of choices that couldn't be undone. Jason had his new house in Beaverton, having sold our family home at a loss rather than invest the time and resources to maintain it properly. We had all moved forward, though, not in the ways any of us had anticipated. After helping my father arrange his essential items in the assisted living apartment, I prepared to leave. Our goodbye was neither warm nor cold, but thoughtful. The interaction of two people who had hurt each other, but were choosing a different path forward. "Will you come visit?" he asked the question, holding none of the assumption or demand it might have in the past. "Yes," I replied honestly. "Not weekly, but regularly. We can have lunch in the dining room here. Get to know each other again a little at a time." He nodded, accepting these terms as fair. "I'd like that." As I drove home to my condo, I felt a sense of completion that had eluded me since the night of my father's ultimatum. The circle had not closed perfectly. Some damage could never be fully repaired. But a new equilibrium had been established. Not everything lost had been restored, but something valuable had been gained in the process of rebuilding. That evening, sitting on my balcony with a glass of wine, I looked out over the city lights and felt genuine contentment. The betrayal had forced me to create a life entirely of my own design rather than one shaped by obligation and others' expectations. In trying to take something from me, my father and brother had inadvertently set me free. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a family betrayal? Drop a comment below sharing your experience, or how you would handle a situation like mine. Sometimes the most painful endings create space for unexpected new beginnings. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's essential. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, the home that matters most is the one you build within yourself.